I'm Dan Schneider. This is MRC Uncensored. I have one of the hardest working journalists in media today. This is the one and only Ben Ferguson. Nobody in media is as enterprising and entrepreneurial as Ben Ferguson. I don't know anybody else like him. He's got his own podcast. He's got a podcast with Senator Ted Cruz. He has written many books or many columns. He also owns a restaurant and a gun range and several other things. He's an incredible guy. Ben Ferguson, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Now, so Ben, just briefly, why'd you get into this business when you were just a young teenager, as I recall?
Yeah, simple answer. In radio, no one could see you. And I called into a radio show when I was 12 years old because I thought the host was lying about an issue. It was the school lunch program back in 1994 with Richard Gephardt. And you may remember that famous moment where he held up a bottle of ketchup and he said, "Is this what Republicans consider a vegetable now?" And I looked at my mom who was listening in the car. I said, "There's no way that's true." And she said it was a teachable moment. She was a teacher. She said, "Well, you should call your congressman and find out if you're right or not." And so I did. And they faxed me a copy of the bill on that old fax paper that rolled off. My dad was not happy because I wasted all of his paper. And I read the entire bill and I found out that the host was in fact lying. And so I called into her show the next day and I told her I thought she should apologize to her audience for lying. And then I didn't know Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal when that happened. I just knew that this wasn't right to lie to people. And in that moment, she started screaming at me. And I said, "Well, have you read the bill?" And she said, "Well, no one reads the bills." And I said, "Well, that's not true. I have, and maybe you should before you say you're an expert and lie to people on the radio and mislead them." And I fell in love with the radio. I fell in love with media in that exact moment because I realized that people could judge me for my words and not my age. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, I do radio hits. I did one last night. There was a 35-minute hit. I've done podcasts. The great thing about radio and podcast, as opposed to like a Fox News hit, is that you can actually spend time discussing an issue. And you're one of the co-hosts with Senator Ted Cruz of The Verdict. And I tell people, when people ask me, who are your go-to news sources, that podcast is one of the 5 or 6 things that I say is indispensable to me. I don't think there's any other media outlet of any kind that gives such a thorough analysis so well as you and Senator Ted Cruz do on The Verdict.
It's really been one of the most fun things in my career. I mean, Dan, when you start young like I do, you have big aspirations. And Rush Limbaugh was the guy, and you always think, I want to do something like that. I want to have an impact in this conversation in America. I want to influence people, and I want to make sure conservative values are being heard. And when I got the opportunity to team up with Senator Cruz, it was a dream. I'd known Senator Cruz since he ran for Senate the very first time. I was involved when he ran for president in 2016 as well. And to get to know him on a human level, and I say to him all the time, my goal is to humanize you to an audience in this country that only sees you in sound bites and maybe for 4 or 5 minutes on Fox News. And if you listen to the show, and you do, and so you know this, Ted Cruz is a really fun guy. He is a guy that genuinely cares about this country. He cares about the Constitution. And he loves to explain how the sausage is made. And that this last episode that we did right before the bill, explaining why it was dead. And also how the Republican senators are interacting with one another at these lunches that they have on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. And how the room was fighting and how it was a vigorous debate over this bill and what was right, what was wrong, what policies were wrong, and most importantly, the strategy that Republicans had. In this, you don't get that anywhere else, and it pulls back the curtain on how Washington works. And I really think that's why the show's become so successful and is continuing to grow.
Yeah, I've worked in Washington now for almost 3 decades, and I've had jobs where I kind of know what the news is going to be 3 days in advance.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like it's such an advantage to me that I've had these different jobs and roles. This is an opportunity for people in Lenexa, Kansas, or Sacramento, California, Memphis, Tennessee, to become an insider. They actually get to know what's going on and what the news is going to be. If anybody actually cares about DC, about public policy formation, and you don't listen to The Verdict, you're missing out. And this is the way to actually get it done.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And it's fun to talk about the issues before they happen instead of in reaction to them, like so many people. And look, a lot of shows, and I'm one of those, you got to react a lot of time to the news. But when you talk to the people that are voting on the bills or creating the legislation or fighting over the legislation, it's just eye-opening to see, one, I think how dysfunctional Washington is. Two, how dysfunctional the Republican Party is. I mean, the Democrats, say what you want. They stay together, they unite. You don't see a lot of infighting with them on issues, and yet you have Republicans where there is so much infighting. Look at the what just happened with Mayorkas is a perfect example. You have a chance to impeach Mayorkas, not because you know it's a political decision because you don't like him. I never believe in impeachment for those reasons, to punish your political opponent, but because he's not following the law of the land and he's not protecting this country. And yet Republicans screwed up that first vote. Now there's a chance I think we're going to have another vote on that. But when you see things like this happen, then you learn what's going on behind the scenes. It makes you want to go insane, but it also makes you understand how important it is that you take time and elect the right people to represent you in Washington.
Well, look, you're having a real impact, whether it's The Verdict with Ted Cruz or your own podcast. I do want to get to that a little bit later. But because you're effective, big media and big tech is trying to silence you.
Yeah.
You've been censored many times. One recent censorship of you and Ted Cruz actually related to the Media Research Center. We had a team that put together a video that showed a Palestinian actor named Salah Al-Jafari. And this guy put together several videos of himself dying, of being killed. And these videos were being distributed.
A crisis actor 101.
Yes. And YouTube did not like you promoting that video. You got censored not just once for this thing, but twice. There was first an age restriction thing that popped up, and then even after somebody said, yes, I am above the age limit, then sort of, are you sure? Because it's got really ugly images here, meaning that YouTube diminished the population of viewers of your video, I'm guessing by 90 to 95%.
Oh, it was huge. And this is, what I love about being able to talk about this and the great work that Media Research Center is doing. When this video came out and you guys put it out there, I sent it over to Senator Cruz, like, we got to use this. Like, I don't want to use it in an audio only version. We do the show 3 days a week. One of those days is usually a video podcast as well. And I was like, I want to save this. And I want to play it when we record traditionally on Sundays. For the Monday podcast, we do video and audio. And I was like, can we save this? And so we saved it for a few days. And then we played it. And sure enough, what happened was as soon as we put it up on YouTube, within hours, they had censored it. They had to say that you had to watch the video. You had to age verify. And all that is just trying to suppress the video. So people don't realize that you have these crisis actors that are working on behalf of the terrorists, trying to act like Israel is not defending themselves, but killing innocent people on purpose and attacking hospitals on purpose, which didn't happen. And so I got to say, I'm grateful. The senator's grateful that you guys put this out there. And then when we can use it to even reach more people, everybody wins by seeing the truth.
Well, not only is this crisis actor alive and well, but so is his own YouTube page. You got censored by YouTube, but he did not. I mean, that's really telling.
Well, and this is where you notice big tech is joined together with what, journalists, and they say, oh, well, the journalists have said that this is fake, and they fact check it. So therefore we can censor it. This goes back to the Hunter Biden story when they came out, they're like, well, the media is not going to do this. Now we're going to have the ability to pull it down. Now you can't link to the story. Then you have 50 plus people in the intelligence community come out, all orchestrated by the Biden campaign. And they say, oh, well, we all believe this is Russian disinformation, even though the FBI at the time knew it was real. We find out the FBI is meeting with Facebook and Twitter and silencing a legitimate news story, not just legitimate, Dan, a news story that is the type that should win you awards for covering and exposing. The type of journalism that Bernstein and Woodward that I learned about in school and journalism school at Ole Miss that you're supposed to do. This is the hardest story to get, and you're supposed to expose it. Instead, what they do, the deep state work together with the media, and they work together with big tech to silence an opinion because they wanted to rig the election to make sure that Joe Biden won, and they knew this story could bring Joe Biden's presidential bid to a halt. And that's why they lied to all of us to influence the election.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Facebook. Facebook doesn't like you either. You've been censored by Facebook a few times. Give us some of those examples.
Yeah, the first time I ever got really hammered by Facebook, I spoke out at CPAC down in Florida about big tech censorship and silencing conservatives. I was on the plane ride home the next morning, and I land and I have all these emails from Facebook of all these violations where somebody went in and went back like 7 years to ding my account from things that we had never deleted, saying partially false, partially false, partially false. That's their way of saying, well, it's not, you weren't lying, but we don't like what you're saying. So we'll say it's partially false, and then shut down my page completely. Zero reach. I had spent countless dollars promoting that page, which Facebook encouraged you to do to grow your audience. I had figured out a way to literally make a large part of my living off of Facebook. And within hours of landing, I couldn't put anything up on Facebook. They were in what you call Facebook jail. And to this day, when I log into my account, which has over 1 million followers, it says your page is at risk of being unpublished because of violations. And this is the world we live in now with big tech. And so you have two options. You either find other venues to get your message out, which obviously is where podcasting is so important, and radio. But it's sad that I have this audience, and I spent a lot of time, years. I mean, we're talking about a decade promoting and building a brand on Facebook. We also promoted posts. We promoted videos. We spent money with Facebook, right? You're a partner with them. I had a person, a phone number at Facebook to work with. And then as soon as this happened, I called him like, what's going on? Like, you guys, we're in business together. And he was like, let me look at this. Maybe I can fix this. I'll get back to you. Never heard from me again and never answered our phone calls again.
You know, you talk about how the left operates to try to dry up your revenue sources. They want to kill us. And
yes.
So
they want you to go broke. They want you to be in financial ruin. It's not just silencing you. And I sorry to interrupt, but I want people to understand this. Their objective is to make sure that you can't pay your bills, and your life and your political life and your journalistic life ends in ruins where you are bankrupt. It's not just about silencing you. They want to destroy everything you have and take it all away from you.
Yep. So we've done work that shows how some of these ratings firms like NewsGuard and sort of the newer player in this space, Ad Fonte, how they are so biased, how they exist to pummel conservatives. And then advertisers, the big ad firms, they look at those ratings and say, well, let's not have Coca-Cola or other big firms advertise with Ben Ferguson. And these firms are helping to drive away your revenue sources to have you ended. So the verdict with Ted Cruz on the Ad Fonte scorecard, you guys essentially get what I label as a D. You get 27 points out of 56. It's about a D that you're given. And Ad Fonte is telling all these advertisers, are you sure you want to advertise with them? Because they're unreliable. But Ben, you've got your own podcast separate from the verdict with Ted Cruz. You've got the Ben Ferguson podcast, and I'm not sure if I'm happy to let you know or sad to let you know that you, without Ted, you score even worse. You're an F. You're an 11.69 on the Ad Fonte's rating system.
I just want to know how they get the 0.69 on their rating system. Like, that's what I really like. What made me stay at 11.69? I laugh about this now, and it's funny that you bring this up, because Senator Cruz and I the other day were doing a small meeting, and somebody asked about verdict, and they asked about my show, and they're asking about why is it that in Fox and conservative media we don't see big advertisers. And we laughed and we showed them there's a YouTube video, and I don't know who made it. I apologize. I want to promote it for them because it's amazing. And it's a spoof. It's a comedy skit of the difference if you have a liberal podcast and a conservative podcast, your advertisers. So like, it's Pfizer if you're a liberal podcast, it's Walt Disney World, it's IBM, it's Amazon. And then they show the ads that are on the conservative podcast. It's like Patriot Water. Get your water that's patriotic. And it's laughable, because if you live in this space, as I do, and look, you have to make a living. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I'm providing for my family. I love what I do, but you also have to pay your bills. And I don't have a single company that is, I think, a Fortune 500 company that I've had on my show as an advertiser in about 10 years. Now, my opinion hasn't changed in 10 years. What's happened is what you talked about now, this boycotting and the silencing. And if you're a publicly traded company, you can't be associated with anyone that's conservative, but you can sponsor liberals all day long. You can sponsor radical leftists all day long. You can give money to universities that tell you that there's no difference between a man and a woman all day long. But you cannot be associated with someone like myself because I'm a conservative and it might hurt your brand.
These advertisers have pulled money away from conservative media, not because conservative media in and of itself is the enemy. It's because they do not want the American public to get this news. They do not want the American public to be informed.
Bingo.
They want the American public only to get their news from ABC, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, maybe a handful of other organizations. That's where they want the American public to get their news. And they can tolerate your existence so long as you are not educating Americans about what's really going on. You are a shining example of what media ought to be.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for the work you guys do. I can't say that enough. I hope everyone that's watching does whatever they can to support you guys. At MRC, it is incredible work. It's desperately needed. So thanks for what you guys doing. And I love getting to partner with you and highlight your amazing and brilliant work whenever you guys are putting out stuff that no one else is getting.